Welcome again. Welcome to this moment. And I want to reflect on truthfulness tonight, and noticing that word, not truth so much, but the practice of inclining toward the truth. So, truthfulness as part of the Buddha's path and part of the teachings, and really our protector in life. And I'm intentionally starting with the word truthfulness rather than truth because I really want to emphasize that this is a practice, not so much a destination or a thing. So we'll talk a bit about truth, of course, too, but there's something really beautiful in this word truthfulness because it invites us into a relational practice, a practice of truth-telling to each other, truth-telling to ourselves and the world that we live in. And some of you will remember that truthfulness is one of the paramis, the 10 beautiful qualities that it's said that the Buddha practiced and practiced over countless lifetimes until they reached a sort of perfection and fullness, and that it was this coming together of the beautiful qualities over time that uh, that manifested in his Buddhahood. And we've talked about them before: generosity, virtue, meaning our ethics, our integrity; renunciation, letting go, particularly letting go of greed, hatred, and delusion; and wisdom and energy and patience; truthfulness, resolve, loving kindness, and equanimity. And noticing these qualities, supporting and nurturing them through attending to them like a garden, and practice. This is what leads to freedom, to the mind and heart of a Buddha. And whenever I reflect on this, I also love to reflect that in the tradition, it's said that it took the Buddha countless lifetimes to perfect these qualities. And so it helps me give myself a little slack, or at least some ease around thinking I've got to get it all right now. I only have to incline in that direction and keep inclining. And one of the interesting things about truthfulness is it's the one parami that it said the Buddha had always in abundance. So it was the perfected one. It was the one that was supporting all his growth in all of the other paramis. So if you're down here in the desert today and you're able to walk out in nature, like I was able to a few hours ago, it's unbelievably lush. The hills that are usually so mostly barren and brown are just crowded with green grasses and flowers and bushes and cactus flowers and critters already. There's such an effusion of life and growth. And when I see that, I reflect on all the seeds, all the seeds that came to fullness, that were invisible and yet always present on the soil, in the crevices in the rocks, all waiting for the right conditions to come to fullness, to come to life, like the paramis. The rains and the sun and the nurturing of the seeds, until it's just inevitable that they germinate and come into their own. And so just as we can water these seeds of the paramis, it's the same kind of thing. We keep nourishing them, keep giving them water, keep remembering them, and eventually they germinate and blossom and come into their own fullness, like they did for the Buddha. So think of today, this reflection as some water for the seed of truthfulness, this beautiful quality that it seems is really in kind of short supply right now, especially in this dominant culture. And that's really my inspiration when I thought, what do I want to talk about this week? But I just really wanted to lift up this essential quality of truthfulness, valuing what is real and speaking what is true, aligning ourselves with the good and the real. So, like most of us, I grew up steeped in this culture. And I have to say, I'm somewhat filled with dread at the lessening of even lip service that is paid to the virtue of truthfulness. Politicians and media and companies have not probably suddenly become way far less truthful, although it sure feels like that. But what really feels new to me is that truthfulness is no longer held up as a foundation of our shared world. It's no longer a given that this is a common value. And that so many think that it's okay to lie in the service of what you want personally or politically or commercially. And there's this devaluing of truthfulness happening, and it's happening right before our eyes. And so many right now who should be leading, who are instead lying, who don't even seem to care for what is true, who are acting in ways that debase trust and confidence in each other. And I know that that's always been going on to some extent, but it used to be that at least there was a gloss, there was a profession that, yes, we value truthfulness. And now that gloss doesn't even seem to be there, which is really troubling. Um, so I read this uh, blog called Hullabaloo. It's a political blog, and there was something kind of relating to this morning. And Heather Partridge, who writes it, quoted Garry Kasparov, who's the Russian chess player and freedom activist. And he said that the point of disinformation isn't to manipulate the truth, it's to exhaust your critical thinking. Disinformation isn't to manipulate the truth, because you can't really manipulate the truth is the truth, but it's to exhaust your critical thinking, to get us to give up on what is true. So maybe it's an okay thing in some ways that the mask is slipping now, because in some way we're probably seeing more clearly what's been hidden, and probably for some of us has been really, really apparent all along. And then, on top of it, and then we'll get into the Dharma, but I guess it's also been really intense, or I should say clear, as I start reading about the different AI, artificial intelligence models that don't have built into them a fundamental allegiance to truthfulness. And Heather also quoted somebody, I don't know who it was, fiction is just as good, maybe better in the attention economy. So that's scary. And that is a call to remember this beautiful foundation of spiritual practice and harmony and truth. So more than ever, we need truth tellers, truth seekers, truth lovers. And again, I want to really phrase that we need truthfulness and seekers and lovers of truthfulness, of that practice. So another sort of line that came to my mind this week was from the movie A Few Good Men, which I've actually never seen, but I heard that line a number of times. I guess it's a famous Jack Nicholson line. You can't handle the truth, but we can. We can handle the truth. That's what the Buddha's teaching is all about. We can handle the truth. And here's how to do it: waking up from delusion and associating with wakefulness. So, like all of the paramis, we are invited into a relationship of practice with them. So before I memorized them, I used to keep a card on my desk with the 10 paramis, to remind me of which of these qualities would I like to develop right now? Which of these qualities would serve this moment in my experience. And truthfulness informs them all. So if the purpose of meditation and the practices that we do is to see and know things as they really, really are, and in that wisdom, that clear seeing, finding freedom, then practicing truthfulness is essential. And the Buddha was really clear on the importance of this practice, of being honest, honest with ourselves, and honest as we can possibly be from wherever we are at all times. So there's a very well-known story where the Buddha is talking to his son Rahula, and Rahula is a young novice monk, and his dad's the Buddha, so maybe he got some special attention, I hope so. But it's said in the suttas that he saw the Buddha coming toward him and way off in the distance, and so Rahula spread out a seat for the Buddha and placed water for washing the feet. And so the Buddha approached and he sat on the seat that Rahula had spread out for him and washed his feet. And then Rahula bowed to the Buddha and sat down to one side. Then the Buddha, leaving a little water in the pot, addressed Rahula. Rahula, do you see this little bit of water left in the pot? Yes, sir. That's how little of a monastic's nature that is left in those who are not ashamed to tell a deliberate lie. Then the Buddha, tossing away what little water was left in the pot, said to Rahula, do you see this little bit of water that was tossed away? Yes, sir. That's how the monastic's nature is tossed away in those who are not ashamed to tell a deliberate lie. And later in the same sutta, the Buddha says, in the same way, when someone is not ashamed to tell a deliberate lie, there is no bad deed that they would not do. Someone is not ashamed to tell a deliberate lie. There is no bad deed that they would not do. So you should train like this. I will not tell a lie, even for a joke. So the Buddha didn't give a ton of commandments like we have in some other traditions, but this is a pretty insistent and definite invitation to truthfulness. Because without truthfulness or honesty or clarity, the Buddha is saying that we cannot progress on the spiritual path and that we're a danger to ourselves and to others. Ignorance and delusion, the lies that we tell ourselves and that our culture tells us, this is the source of all suffering. To uproot ignorance, we need this quality of exquisite truth-telling. So this is part of why coming together like this, spiritual community, sangha, is so important, because we remind each other through our presence and our practice, and when we're in person, hopefully talking with each other, we remind ourselves of our commitment to waking from delusion and associating with truthfulness, and know that we're not alone in that. Waking up together, taking the vows of non-harming, integrity, truth-telling. So the Dharma, the second refuge, we have Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha as our three refuges, is not just the teachings. The Dharma is not just the teachings, it is also reality, the way things are, how it is. So the word truth can be very big, grand, austere, and it isn't the only translation of the word that the Buddha used. Satya is the word that the Buddha used. And satya can also be translated as the real. So if the truth feels like too much, maybe what's really real will land more easily as a practice. And as a relational practice, we're invited to abstain from saying what isn't true. So this is the fourth precept, like we take when we go on retreats, and that we can take every day of our lives. The fourth precept, I undertake the training to refrain from saying what is not true. So we're asked to speak truthfully to our greatest understanding of what's true. And we're given a few guidelines for doing this with kindness, because we're also asked to refrain from harm in the precepts. So how do I speak the truth in a way that causes as little harm as possible? And so the guidelines that the Buddha gave, the first is speaking at the right time, asking ourselves, is this the right time to share this with another? Should I speak in private? Is this person open to discussing this with me? Speaking the facts. There's a satya, truthfulness, realness. Speaking what we've observed, what we know. Being clear about what we think and what we've observed, at the same time as being open to knowing that this may not be the whole of the truth, just what we know, speaking truthfully. And the Buddha asked us to reflect, do I speak harshly or do I speak gently? What's my tone? Maya Angelou so famously said, I've learned that people will forget what you said, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Do I speak with words that are beneficial? What I'm sharing may be true, but is it useful? Does it lead to connection, to benefit, toward healing? Do I speak from a place of goodwill? Am I able to share what I need to share or want to share from a place of caring? Have I really looked at my own intentions and emotions around what I'm sharing? And am I remembering the humanness of the person that I'm sharing with? And sometimes, no matter what our intention may have been, no matter how mindful we may have felt we were being in our speech, it just doesn't land how we wish it had. It's happened to me many times. And that's our invitation to drop into caring, to that fifth one. Speaking from a place of goodwill, remembering the goodwill. When I find that I've spoken unskillfully to someone and I've caused unintended harm, or I feel that I am not being heard, it's a really clear mindfulness bell. Pay attention in this moment. Where is the caring in this moment? Let me stop for a moment all ideas of right and wrong, of getting my point across, whatever it might be. Let me lay down the communication of whatever it was and communicate a different way through complete attention and turning toward my care of the other, remembering that as a foundation, my openness to repair and restore, because that's the only way that we can hear each other, is from a place of openness. So the poem by Rumi, originally written in Persian, out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other doesn't make any sense. So there's that absolute truth. So this kind of caring, truth-telling asks that we are both patient and courageous. And those are the voices that we really hear. They may not always be the loudest voices, but those are the voices that lead us and that bring about great change. The voices that are patient and courageous, like Dr. King or Nelson Mandela or the Dalai Lama or Malala or Thich Nhat Hanh or any great leader in your own life that you can think of. Courageous, persistent, patient. That's love in action, defiant love that says, I'm not going to give up on what is true, and I won't give up on you. And we can say that to ourselves as well. I will not give up on what is true, and I will not give up on you. The spiritual path is one of complete honesty. Am I being truthful to myself? The first step in that is actually noticing what I'm doing, being aware of body, speech, and mind. What am I doing and why am I doing what I'm doing? Being truthful with myself. Am I binging that series on Hulu, just for fun, or is there something asking me to care for it? Like something that happened during the day or news that I got that's really painful and I can't be with or don't want to be with. I'm not quite ready to hold it. And so I'm distracting myself. It's okay to distract ourselves sometimes. But can I do that with honesty? Like, yes, I'm distracting myself and I know why I'm doing that. And I know that I want to pay attention to this when the time is right, when I may be a little more resourced. Truth without kindness isn't really true. And I learned this from my mentor, Rena Weissman, who often teaches if it's not kind, it's not true. If it's not kind, it's not true. And people hear this. I heard it and I was like, what? That sounds really nice, but what do you mean? How? So if there isn't kindness in what's being said, externally or internally, if there isn't kindness in what we're communicating to ourselves and to others, if there isn't caring in the field, then there's aversion, there's resistance, pushing away, separation, clinging to views. In that aversion or that clinging, our view is narrowed. It's closed and not truly open, and so therefore incomplete, not able to see satcha, what is really real in this moment. So then the question came up for me, how do we know what's true? Talking about truthfulness. So we're invited into truthfulness, invited into this foundational key practice. But even when we think something is true and we're communicating skillfully, we may not have the whole truth, or we may be mistaken. And that's why I think that the most important teachings here are around truthfulness as a practice, a way of being, a foundation. Caring for the truth and practicing truthfulness does not mean that we're never mistaken. It means that, as the Buddha told Rahula, we guard against ever intentionally speaking what isn't true. So if we know it's not true, we don't say it. We align with the Dharma. We respect the awesome power of truth so that we never intentionally speak what's false, even in jest, as the Buddha said. So truthfulness as a practice doesn't mean infallibility. It means I understand the power of truth to heal and alleviate suffering, and I vow to practice and uphold it to the very best of my ability to keep truthfulness alive in my practice. That's what we do on and off the cushion, exploring what's real with all the integrity that we can summon. So Tanasaru Bhikkhu, who's a Southern California monk and teacher, uh, has a book called Fear of the Truth. And in that book he wrote, it's interesting that of all the virtues, the Buddha makes truth the most important. Truth is not just a quality of accurate statements, it's also a quality of the mind. In fact, and you could say the mind and heart. In fact, if you want to find the truth, you have to develop this quality of truthfulness, the willingness to look at what's here, admit what's here, so that you can work with it. And the Buddha said, and I love this quote, however we conceive of something, it is other than that. However we conceive of something, it is other than that. Concepts are not truth. Experience gets us much closer to truth. So if you've never eaten an orange before and try and describe it to you and I tell you all about it, it's got this smooth skin that you peel off, and one side is smooth, that's true, but and kind of orange in color or very orange in color, and the other side is sort of suedey, spongy, and kind of yellowy white, and it has these little fiber things. And then there are these sections inside of that, like little baggies that, are like kind of crescent shaped. And inside of these little baggies, you can eat them, by the way, there's this shiny, glossy stuff. And when you bite into that, there's a lot of juice. And how does it taste? Well, it tastes just like an orange. I don't know what to say. So if that was your introduction to an orange, you really wouldn't know what an orange was. You might recognize one in a store or on a tree and say, oh, yeah, I bet that's that orange thing that Ian was talking about. But you still wouldn't really know it. But of course, when you taste it for yourself, then you know it. You know it well. You have your own experience, your own relationship with this thing, this that we name orange. And that experience is much, much closer to the truth of orange. So direct experience always gets us closer to what's real. And in this case, my description, my words were truthful, but incomplete, because we each need to know for ourselves. This is why the Buddha didn't just give us all of the words and the teachings, but he said, oh, you have to practice them. Now go do these things. Go meditate. Go look at reality. Know it for yourself. And the Buddha advised against holding fixed views, solidifying around concepts and stories, and then clinging to them. So the invitation is more to be open to reality unfolding all around us. And just a couple things I wanted to share, but this one in particular, there's a beautiful teaching that the Buddha gave about what he called safeguarding or preserving the truth. And so this young Brahmin priest or student who was a master of the Vedas, he was only 16 years old though, and so he waited quite a while to ask the Buddha a question. And he wanted to ask the Buddha about how the Vedas were held in his Brahmanic tradition. And so he said, Master Gotama, in regard to the ancient Brahmanic hymns, the Vedas that have come down through oral transmission, preserved in the collections, the Brahmins come to the definite conclusion, only this is true, anything else is wrong. What does Master Gotama say about this? And it's a long sutta, so I'll paraphrase, but the Buddha points out the importance of not clinging to fixed views. And he teaches the young Brahmin about the safeguarding of the truth. And he says, if a person has faith, they preserve truth when they say, my faith is thus. But they don't yet come to a definite conclusion, only this is true and everything else is wrong. In this way, they safeguard the truth. So not being super quick or hasty to say, this is true, but being aligned with truthfulness of, I have faith. And then he continues from faith with the other ways that we may take something to be true. If a person approves of something, so they like this thought or this belief, or if they receive an oral tradition, if it's something that we've received in our culture, if they reach a conclusion based on reasoning, yeah, seems to make sense. If they can say, yeah, I've got faith, or I approve of this, or I've been taught this, or yeah, this makes sense, but not yet saying, capital T, this is truth and anything that doesn't agree with it is wrong, that's how we safeguard the truth, by giving it space. So again, truthfulness, but not clinging. I may have faith. I may have been told. I may have read it. It may make sense. But can I not sort of calcify, harden around it? keeping that freshness of however we conceive of something, it is other than that. Reality is not tied to words, cannot be fully known through words. Time for truth tellers is here. So the Zen master Jesus said, not knowing is most intimate. So it's a Zen koan, so I won't say I know the truth of what it's saying, but to me it means not clinging to concepts and ideas and views about how it is, but safeguarding the truth by being open to what is, without fixed views, allowing whatever it is to reveal itself, because I don't know. I haven't solidified around it. That takes trust and vulnerability and patience. And that vulnerability allows us to see most clearly, most closely, most intimately. And it's said that the parami of truthfulness manifests as intimacy. So it almost seems like a paradox, but it's the practice of truthfulness and the practice of not knowing that allow us to be intimate with ourselves and each other and the unfolding experience of the world. Truthfulness and not knowing. So, Nisargadatta, I'm not saying that quite right, Maharaj, who some of you know, great Indian teacher, his famous book, I Am That. Words create words. Reality is silent. Words create words. Reality is silent. So let's be silent for just a few minutes and then we'll move on from there. Thank you for your kind attention, and would love to open the floor up for comments, questions, thoughts, ways that you practice with truthfulness, or anything that you'd like to share. So if you want to speak, please raise your hand and we can unmute you, or you can unmute yourself. And I want to thank you so much for your time and attention and your support of the sangha. And I want to thank our board and volunteers and donors and everyone who cares for this together, and just dedicating the merit. Wow, yeah. May our practice and our care and our discussion and our curiosity support truthfulness in ourselves and support truthfulness in our world. And may may we be awake to that truthfulness, and may all beings share in the merit of that practice. So thank you very much for your time, and hope to see you soon.